Welcome to XYPN Radio, where your host Alan Moore brings you into a community of fee-only financial planners who want to profitably and successfully serve Gen X and Gen Y clients. If you're ready to get the knowledge you need from leaders in your field, learn from forward-thinking advisors, and take action on your own goals, XYPN Radio is the show for you. Here's your host.
Hello and welcome to this episode of XYPN Radio. This is episode 6 of our launch week. We have already featured guests including Michael Kitsis, Carl Richards, Jeff Rose, Sophia Berra, and Mark Maurer. And upcoming, we still have Jake Keebler, which is going to be a really exciting interview as well. But today it features a friend of mine, Eric Roberge, who is also the founder of Beyond Your Hammock. Now, like many financial planners, Eric started out on the product sales side of financial planning, only to find out that what he really wanted to do was provide comprehensive financial planning to clients. After several transitions through different types of firms, he went through insurance sales, a hybrid advisory firm, and ended up partnering with a fee-only investment advisor before ultimately making the leap to starting his own firm. So this interview really goes through his career progression and how he ultimately built a business to support his great life. Now, I know I'm not supposed to do this, but I will admit that the day that Eric and I recorded this interview, I was a little under the weather, and I think you'll hear it in my voice a little bit, but I felt like the content from Eric was just so valuable, I didn't want to have to re-record. So I do apologize a little, in advance that I sound a little bit under the weather, but I think this interview is awesome, and Eric really knocks it out of the park. Now, before we get to the interview, I want to give a quick shout out to our launch week sponsor, Low Load Insurance Services. Low Load helps fee-only advisors with life, disability, annuity, and long-term care insurance needs for their clients. You can check them out at llis.com. And also be sure to check out episode 5 for an in-depth interview with Mark Maurer, the CEO of LLIS. And you can find that at xyplanningnetwork.com/5. All right, here we go with my interview with Eric Roberge of Beyond Your Hammock. Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining me. I am so excited to have Eric Roberge, the founder of Beyond Your Hammock, on today's episode. Eric, thank you so much for joining us for today's show.
No problem, Alan. This is great. I've been looking forward to coming on this show ever since you mentioned starting it up.
Yeah, it's really exciting to be able to kind of showcase different stories and showcase different ways that advisors have kind of found their own path. And you have a really interesting and I think really unique story to tell in terms of how you became the owner of your own company. But your path has been pretty interesting. So let's just start off kind of going back to how did you kind of get into financial planning? Where did your career in planning start?
Well, I think if we start from the beginning, I've always been focused on investments. Ever since I was in college, I was reading the Wall Street Journal, wondering what kind of trader I would be when I graduated, which ended up leading to not being a trader, but getting into the mutual fund world with State Street Bank and JP Chase. But it was more of a corporate feel, and I wasn't working with individual clients on financial planning per se. So in 2007, I decided to make a leap from the corporate world and do what made the most sense to me, which was cut off my salary and decide to be a financial planner from scratch. So that was an interesting move, and we can get into details there if you'd like, but that was the kickstart of my launch into financial planning.
So let's talk about that a little bit. So you were working, what were you doing at JP Chase?
I was a supervisor in the mutual fund tax department. So basically, we were coming up with the 1099 income statements, tax forms, for mutual funds. So the capital gains and ordinary dividends and understanding all of the different transactions within a mutual fund and making sure that we classified them appropriately from a tax standpoint.
That sounds absolutely horrible. I can't believe you lasted more than 3 days in that job.
Well, it was really fun because from October to March, we had 6 or 7 day work weeks every single year. And I don't like to be repetitive from a day-to-day standpoint, and never mind having to look forward to or really hate the fact that I was coming up on the fall because I knew it was just going to be hell for 6 months.
So it's kind of 6 months on, 6 months off. I guess that's the life of anybody that has to deal with taxes.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, so you're in that environment, and you said you dropped your salary to become a financial planner. Did you go to work for someone that, you basically got paid on kind of an acquisition, kind of an eat what you kill strategy? Like, what did that transition look like for you?
Well, this is a good question because initially I didn't know. It's funny because I was in the financial services world, yet I didn't really know what a financial planner did. My thought was that it would be this high pressure sales environment where there were commissions and you had the ability to make a lot of money. And really at that point I was 27 years old, and money and recognition / fame were my goals. I'm not embarrassed to say that, although it sounds ridiculous looking back, but that was what I was focused on. I wanted money and I wanted to be recognized as someone big in the industry. So I had a lot of conversations with people saying, like, which way do I go? How do I get into the business? People that were working for insurance companies, life insurance companies, people that were working for or had worked for wirehouse banks, and then people that were independent financial planners. And I was just asking them every question possible to figure out which route I should take.
And so how did that kind of lead? Which path, I guess, did you pick based on those conversations?
So I had one conversation that I remember very vividly, and it was with someone who had worked for a life insurance company for a while as a, quote, financial advisor. And then he transitioned to his new company that he started as an independent financial planner. And he worked 15 years for the life insurance company and then shifted over to his own firm. So I said, okay, well, you've done that, and clearly you're happy with what you're doing now. If you had to do it all over again, which route would you take? And he said, I'd go straight to independence. I wouldn't deal with the other crap. And that really stuck with me because I didn't want to have to start over again and again and again. So I went straight to independent financial planning underneath another firm. So I came in, I got my Series 7, I got my Series 66 and my life insurance license. And I hit the ground kind of running, but not really, because I was just trying to feel my way in this new world of financial planning, trying to build up a client base from scratch. And it was quite challenging.
You bring up a couple really good points there. We don't see a lot of people go from independent to working for a insurance company, right? They're always transitioning from working for the insurance company to going independent. We see this in kind of the fee only world too. Very few advisors transition from fee only to fee and commission, but there's a whole bunch of them transitioning from commissions to just strict fee only, which I think is interesting how we all kind of march down that same path. We all kind of end up in the same place eventually.
Yeah, that's really true. It's like a waterfall effect. Right? You start at the top, and eventually you either stop at a certain point. So you go insurance company to a hybrid advisor where you're making commission and charging fees, or you take the next step and you go to fee only. And certainly not many people go directly into fee only, which is an interesting topic in itself because I feel like the XY Planning Network kind of makes that more possible than it's ever been before.
Yeah, and true on that being an interesting topic, just because I think that there's not a lot of opportunities in the fee-only world. There's just not a lot of job opportunities. Starting out in fee-only is really challenging. Some of that is just because there's so much easy money to be made. Well, insurance agents would probably be mad at me for calling it easy money, but there's just so much upfront money that I think that's easier to be made. Whereas when you go fee-only and you're selling a service, you kind of get paid over time instead of all upfront. It's kind of the difference between a one-time service and an ongoing service, but we can jump into more of that a little bit later. So, okay, so you transitioned, you were working for a firm. So did they just bring you in and basically say, use our brand, use our office, but we get a cut of the revenue? Because it sounds like you didn't really have a steady base of income coming in.
Yes, that was how it went. They said, it happened to be a friend, right? So the setup was, my friend's father owned a property and casualty company, insurance company, and he'd had that for years and years and years. And my friend had just graduated a few years back from college, and he was in the financial planning world. So he was coming on board as the financial advisor arm of this P&C shop, and he was building out the investments. So he said, listen, I will sponsor you for your licenses because you need to get sponsored for your Series 7 and your Series 66 by a company that's registered. and we'll see what happens, right? We don't know how it's going to go, but check it out, see if you like it. And if it doesn't work out, we'll just part ways. So I went into their office. I paid rent through the split of revenues that I established with them.
Do you mind sharing? Is that something that you can share publicly, is how the revenue split works? Because for some of us that haven't been in that world, it's an interesting topic.
Sure. Yeah, I think if you're selling products or services in the financial planning world, you're either making a commission or a fee on that product or service. And the split works where, say I make, and at that point I was selling life insurance. So say I make a 3 or 4% commission on a life insurance product. Well, half of that would go to the company that I worked with, because that would pay for rent and paper and other things that I was using in the office over the time that I was there. And it would give them hopefully a little bit of profit on top of that. So people just develop these splits, and they could range from anywhere as low as 15% split to the advisor / broker, all the way up to 90-95%.
That's really interesting, because that's a ton of money. I mean, there's no wonder that there's not a lot of incentive to stay under that structure after you've grown your business. I mean, early on it makes sense because you get rent for, a percentage of not a lot of money. But as you grow your business and you're bringing in a bunch of money, now all of a sudden you're paying out the nose for, the same services that you were paying very little for when you first started.
This is interesting too, because that's exactly what happens with a lot of people, and they get comfortable in that environment. And really, I'm thinking right now of wirehouse brokers. They build themselves up underneath this organization with the support of the organization and the back office support, and they are basically an employee, so they get health insurance and other benefits through the company, and they get comfortable there. And even though the larger firm is taking a good portion of their revenues, they don't know how to make the split, how to break away, because they feel like it would just be really scary to do it all on your own. Yet it's really not that scary.
It's a huge unknown, but you made that leap. What did that look like for you to go from that? Because did you leave that firm and then go basically start your own, or was there an intermediate step?
There were actually 2 intermediate steps. I went from that firm after a year, realizing that, I was just doing it all on my own. And even though they had the back office support, I wasn't benefiting from prospective clients or leads through their organization. Through no fault of them, right? It just wasn't happening. So I said, I need to find somewhere that's going to help me with leads, because I'm not making enough money. I'm not bringing on enough clients. So I went to a firm that was basically doing financial seminars. This is 2008. So the economy's pretty crappy at this point, and not many people are interested in talking to financial planners, because the financial services industry has been bashed and dragged up and down the rocks at that point. So people are afraid of banks. They're not looking to talk with a 27-year-old newly minted financial planner and give them their life savings. Right? That's not happening. So I needed to attach to a firm that was in existence that had some sort of flow of new clients and work with them. So this company was doing seminars and bringing in new clients that way. So they'd have a dinner seminar, and this is something that happened a lot in the industry until 2009-ish. You'd have these financial seminars, and the advisor would give a presentation, pay for their dinner at this restaurant, and then that was your lead generating system. And then you would follow up with these people, and hopefully you'd bring on a few clients out of that. So it would pay for the cost and then some.
I'm interested, how effective were those at actually bringing in leads?
For a while before I was there, it was really great. I mean, I was the junior planner, so the senior planner would give the presentation. I, as a junior planner, would support him during the presentation and then follow up with the prospective clients and set up meetings and then bring them in, and then we would split everything 50-50. That was the idea. It sounded awesome. However, 2009 happened, and after the market dropped, seminars were not working anymore. So this company, they smartly stopped doing seminars because they were turning into just costs suck. They were just spending money on these seminars and not bringing on new clients. So they stopped doing that. So I found myself back to square one. Okay, I'm working for this company now, and I'm up to generating my own leads and finding new clients, and it just was not working. So At that point, I made the the third switch in a matter of 3 years as a new financial planner to another company. And this time I was a little more strategic about it because I said, okay, the average age of an independent financial advisor was 54-ish, depending on what research you looked at. And there's no need for me to reinvent the wheel. I'll just link up with another advisor and help support him grow his business as a sole proprietor. That typically was a lot of the advisors independently had that set up. So I said, I'll attach to him, help him grow his business, build my book at the same time, book of clients, and then hopefully take over his firm. So that was the plan moving into this next segment of my career.
And it sounds so good, doesn't it? I mean, when you think about it, and you're just like, oh, I'm just going to come in and buy the book of business. And I can only say this because I know, and all of our listeners now know that obviously you didn't stay in this position because you started your own firm. But it sounds so good. I think we all, at one point or another, have been in that position of being like, I can come in, I can buy you out. I don't have to start from, scratch. And it sounds awesome. So I think we all have a reason for why it didn't work out. What was your reason for why that strategy didn't end up being effective?
Well, I think from a big picture standpoint, it wasn't effective because neither of us knew what the hell we were doing as far as that goes, that transition goes. Advisors, the industry was built on these independent advisors, so they built their own businesses as more transactional brokers, and then the industry started to transition into the fee-based planning. So this was a fee-based planning firm. So we had the hybrid of making commissions and charging fees at the same time under one of the bigger broker-dealers, which is an excellent broker-dealer, by the way. And it just didn't work out because we didn't know how to design it. I think advisors that build up a business, they have a real strong connection to their business and they're proud of it. And they don't want to give it away to just anybody. So there was that going on his side. And for me, I'm just like, well, show me the path. Like, what is this path going to be when I join your firm and we work through these initial relationship issues? It's kind of like dating, right? You're just working through the issues, trying to figure out what's going to work. I just didn't see a clear path for me to get from point A to point B. Point B being taking over that firm, or at least seeing myself inside of that firm prospering from the business.
I really feel bad, honestly, for people on both sides of this conversation. So, as the younger advisors, we tend to harp on, show us the path. What do you want us to do here? We don't want to come in and work for the next 10 years with kind of a handshake agreement to buy the firm and then that firm not be sold to us or, whatnot. We don't want to be, put in that position. And the flip side is, from the firm owner perspective, they don't really know how to transition. The dollars and cents don't make much sense. As somebody who recently sold a firm, I can tell you that you might as well keep it. Like, why sell it for 2 times gross revenue or whatever the multiplier ends up being when you could just hold on to it for 3, 4, 5 more years, kind of go part-time, not do business, new client acquisition, that sort of thing, and just kind of turn your business into an annuity. So it's actually really hard to sell just from a financial standpoint, much less the fact that you're kind of selling your baby that you created, from the ground up. And so it's such a tough dynamic to really find 2 people, put them in a room together and make that work.
You're right. And, and then emotions get high and people just don't know how to fix things. And it just ends up not working out a lot of times. I felt like, I'm a big image guy. So picture a ship, and this ship is the business, is this guy's firm. And I'm a balloon dangling from a string off the stern of the boat, right? So I'm up there and I just felt like, okay, I'm attached to this ship right now, but I'm really not secure. And at any time, someone could come along and snip that string and just send me out into the atmosphere. I didn't want to, nor could I risk pressing the reset button again. Right? This is the 3rd time I've done this. So I was 32, 33, and I just didn't want to do it again. So I thought it was a bigger risk for me to stay on board with a handshake agreement that something would happen than it was if to just detach completely and try to figure out how to start my own firm. So that's second piece is what I chose to do.
Now, were you transitioning clients from firm to firm, or was it mostly transactional relationships, so you weren't really trying to bring your book with you?
It was a little of both. There was some transactional business, and then there were some clients that I was trying to grow with long term. However, I didn't bring anybody with me each time I moved. I didn't have a ton of clients each place, so it wasn't like I was losing a lot. However, after 3 years, you'd think you'd have some sort of book of business, and I really didn't. So this third move to the independent advisor firm that I was working with, I didn't bring any clients with me. And when I left there to start my business, I had a non-solicit, so I couldn't bring anybody from there to my new business, which was partially a reason why I was upset too, because I said, if I'm going to be here, I don't need to take over your firm. I don't need you to give me your firm. However, if I'm going to be here, I do want to build a book of business that I can call my own, so that if the worst case scenario happens and we don't continue on together, that I have something to show for myself. Because one of the biggest things in this business is if you don't have a book of business, people don't look highly on that. So they're not looking to bring you on board a lot of times if you don't have a book of business.
Sure. It's easier to hire someone that can bring revenue with them as opposed to just hiring someone that's going to cost money until they, build that book up.
Right.
And, I actually know of one firm that was in this process of transitioning, whole handshake agreement, everything's good and all of that. And then one day the owner was like, okay, I think we're going to sell to a venture capital company. And I'd never heard of an RIA selling to a venture capital company. So everybody was kind of shocked, and everyone's kind of sitting there kind of holding the bag like, hey, we have spent a lot of years here building this business, and now all of a sudden we're basically not going to get a cut at all. We're not going to be able to take over anything. And they were kind of in the same position you were of like, the firm owns the clients, you can't solicit them, so you just have to leave and do your own thing.
Right.
So what year are we talking? Is this 2011, 2012?
This was 2012 that I was thinking about leaving the firm and starting my own firm. So that went on for a while in my head, trying to figure out how the heck that's supposed to work.
Yeah, talk us through that process. I mean, because the thought of owning your own firm at such a young age, after you've made so many transitions, like that's got to be overwhelming. So what was your thought process in terms of, really making that leap?
Well, I don't know that I actually had a specific process. It was more like, what is the next step? My thought was, okay, I'll leave this firm and join a fee-only firm, an existing fee-only firm, and build a book of business there. However, I learned from the past, so I was going to make sure that in the agreement, it was that my clients were my own. That was a huge factor there. So I was in several conversations with people with that in mind.
Makes sense.
So I actually did leave that firm and join up with a friend of mine who had his own fee-only firm. And he was focusing on the investment side of things because that's where his background was, the actual trading and investing. And I was the certified financial planner, which, by the way, I had received my designation, my certified financial planner designation at this firm that I was just recently at. I think it's a great opportunity when you do work for another firm, regardless of what the future looks like, to benefit from the ability for you to get your CFP and continue to work and benefit and help the firm you're at. So I think there's a give and take there, and I really do appreciate the fact that I was able to get my CFP through this other firm.
Yeah, that's really good advice, because it is one of those things that just because you're in a situation that you don't think is long term doesn't mean you can't be working towards kind of that next step and really knowing what that next step is. And it sounds like you knew the CFP would be a lead into whatever that step was going to be.
Yeah, it just really gave me some legitimacy as a young planner. So from the outside, someone looking in saying, oh, he has a CFP, that opened a lot of doors, whether it was an employer or a client. It really helped me there. And it also gave me the education that I needed to really be able to do comprehensive planning. Because we talk about comprehensive planning all the time with our clients. However, where do we learn that? It's not something that comes to us. The Series 7 isn't going to teach us that stuff. So really, the best place to learn about how to deliver comprehensive planning is through the CFP program.
You bring up a really good point, because we always talk about the CFP as the credentials and the credibility and the marketing and all that, and we tend to forget that it's really, really good education. It's a really good educational program to teach us, like you said, how to do comprehensive financial planning. Not to rabbit trail too much, but I'm curious because I have never had a license other than the Series 65. So people tell me whenever they're coming from kind of the brokerage world that the Series 7 is a really difficult, really comprehensive exam. Can you just give me just like a brief overview of like what's the similarities and differences between the 7 and CFP? Because people tend to try to make it seem like they're very similar exams. And it sounds like based on your last comment that you don't agree with that.
No, I do not agree 100% with that one. It's like comparing apples to cucumbers. They're not even in the same category. The Series 7 is really built to help people with trading investments. So there's a lot of stocks, bonds, options, regulatory requirements in that realm. That's the education you're getting from the 7. And it's really, I sat down, studied for a month, took the 3-hour exam, and passed.
Oh,
that was it. So there was no real education there. It was like study for as much as you can, know all the information, pass the test, and then move on.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. I'm glad you shared that because I've always kind of wondered about just how comprehensive it was. And some folks make it seem like it's like the CFP, it's a 200-hour, study test and crazy exams and all of that. It sounds like it was a little bit trimmed down from that.
Yeah. When that's the only thing you have to measure tests up against in the industry, then sure, that looks like a really hard test. And it was by far the hardest of the tests I took, life insurance, Series 66 and 7. However, when you compare it to something even bigger like the CFP, where you have to take 6 or I think it's up to 7 courses, college level courses over at least a 9-month period, typically, maybe even longer, depending on your schedule, before you can even sit down for an exam that used to be 10 hours long. That's the huge difference there.
Don't you feel a little jaded that the new CFP certificates don't have to take a 2-day, 10-hour exam?
Yeah, it's so streamlined, and they have computers, and you don't have to fill in the little bubbles with your pencil.
What are these computer things? And bring back the Scantron CFP board. I'm so glad that they made that update because actually now we get to be the walking uphill in the snow both ways to school because people can be like, well, I passed the CFP. I'm like, you know what? But it was only one day and it was on a computer. So, that's a little biased. But the CFP, I mean, it's still, I haven't looked at the most recent numbers. I think when I took it, it had a 55% pass rate. And so I would imagine, I don't know what the pass rate is on the 7, but
I think it was higher than that. It was higher than that for sure. Not everybody passed it. I think you needed a 70% to pass it. So it wasn't terribly difficult to do if you put the time in.
Fair enough. Yeah, I remember with the Series 65, it was just like every question was basically how to not lose your license. It was like every question was, and I remember it being very like, it was almost like ethical questions. So like, can you charge a commission and a fee in the same account? And I'm like, well, you shouldn't. I don't know if that means you can't. I don't know what that means. So anyway, okay, so we'll pull that rabbit trail back. Thank you for going down that little hole with me. So you went to go work with a friend of yours. Did he have an established RIA and was doing investments, or did y'all kind of start that firm together?
He had an established firm. He was all registered, and he had been doing it for a couple of years. He had about $5 million under management, so it wasn't a big firm. But he was happy with it, and he was slowly growing it. And I had brought up the CFP because I was a certified financial planner. He was not. So we wanted to join forces, and I was going to establish the financial planning arm, and he was going to continue with the investment arm, and we'd work together as a team. And that was the idea. For 6 months, I was doing that kind of on my own. He was overseeing what I was doing, but really I was just building up a book of business of my own. And it wasn't much of a team environment. So he had his own thing going on. There was nothing wrong with what he was doing. He's still a great guy. We're still on really great terms. He was super supportive. It just didn't work out. So I was continuing to think like, maybe I can do this on my own. Now that I've seen it inside of a fee-only firm, like I see what it takes to actually have this for myself. It's not that big of a barrier to entry. I thought it was this huge barrier, really from a financial standpoint. How can I afford to start an RIA on my own? It would just be so incredibly hard because coming from the broker-dealer world, you see all these compliance regulations and everything else. And I just didn't think I had the infrastructure or the ability to build an infrastructure to create my own registered investment advisor company until I started working with my friend.
And we're able to see just how I mean, I don't want to say it's easy to get started, but it doesn't require a ton of overhead.
Exactly. At this point too, I mean, I'm just revved up. I'm like, all right, I've been in the industry for 5-ish years, I think at that point. I see what I want to do. I had been told forever that I couldn't work with younger people. And I started to realize that, yes, I can. I just have to figure out a revenue model to make it work. So I was just on computer, on spreadsheets and drawing things and writing down my ideas to try to figure out how this would actually work. And when I was working with my friend, I was charging people for financial planning. I was actually charging $1,800 for a financial plan. And my thought was, all right, now they're clients for life, and I'm going to do such a good job for them that they're going to build up assets, and then I'll manage those assets. So there's no need for them to pay me ongoing. However, I quickly realized that I was just running myself crazy trying to get new clients to pay me $1,800 so that I could pay my rent.
Sure.
And it was just it was actually, even though it was a fee-only business, it was very transactional in nature. And they weren't building up assets quickly because it takes a while to build up assets. So that model didn't work.
It does, and it's why many of us are kind of not as supportive of the hourly business model. I think it's a really great way to help clients, and it makes financial planning very accessible to a lot of folks that haven't had access before. But it is a really, really tough way to run a business. And even though you were charging project fees, that's similar to saying you were charging $180 an hour and it took you 10 hours. So therefore it's $1,800 plans. And it's just tough because there's a lot of business development that goes into that.
Absolutely.
So it sounds like you kind of learned there, project-based, hourly-based, not ideal for building a long-term business. Maybe it actually is ideal for building a long-term business because you will get those assets, but in the short run, you got to pay your rent. You got to generate revenue. So did you adopt any new fee models while you were there, or did you make that transition after you kind of started your own firm?
I made it the transition after I started my firm. There, it was really just the one-time financial planning fee. And I forgot to mention, when I had left my previous firm, I was making a salary again. So, when I first became a financial advisor, I had no salary. The second move, I had no salary. The third one, I actually had an established salary. So it gave me a baseline.
Oh, nice.
And when I moved out to work with my friend, I did not have a salary again. So that's why I was charging these fees. And to supplement my income, because I had grown smarter, saying, hey, you know what? I actually can't survive without an income. I need money. I knew that at this point. Very eye-opening.
Sounds like you were living for a lot of years without a lot of income. So
yeah. So in order to give myself a baseline in a world of variable income, I became a waiter at a restaurant for the first time in my life at the age of 33. And this idea blew the mind of the guy I used to work for. He was like, there's no way in heck you're going to be able to work as a waiter and build a business. That's crazy talk. And it was from his experience. However, I said, watch me. And that's exactly what I did. For 10 months, I worked as a waiter to I think I was bringing in like $1,800 a month as a waiter as I was bringing on new clients. And it was when I left. So that was happening. I made the decision to start my own firm. And once I did that, because of the experience I had with charging the one-time fee for $1,800, I said, I need a monthly revenue model. I need something that's going to at least start to build my baseline so I could have my waiter income at $1,800. And then every client I brought on, that would add to, I was charging maybe $100 a month per client when I was bringing them on with my new business. So it would just bring up that total income per month every time I brought on a client. So I could see that the gap between what I was making and what I needed to make to pay all my bills was shrinking. And that was a really great feeling.
It's an interesting viewpoint on that, and just kind of monitoring that on a monthly basis to say, I know how much I need, I know how much I'm making, waiting, and every new client kind of eats into that, gap. And so you kind of can see, see the finish line in terms of when you're going to hit that point where you can stop waiting tables.
Yeah, exactly. And just like when I'm working with younger clients now, it was so important for me to establish my cash flow worksheet. So what was my income coming in? What were my expenses going out? how much could I shrink my expenses, my fixed expenses, so that I was living off of basically nothing so that I could survive. And being able to live off of next to nothing for a long time built up a good habit in me. So I was training myself at the highest level of expense cutting for a long time. And once I hit that mark where I was making enough money to pay my expenses, it wasn't that hard to keep my expenses down. And then I could actually see the gap on the other side opening up where, wow, I'm actually making a profit each month. And I can do something. I can invest in my business, which is typically what I do with extra money at this point. But I was seeing that shift, and it was really inspiring to see that happening for my business.
I know hindsight's 2020, but looking back just on the kind of that time period that you're talking about, you did everything right. And I'll explain why I say this, but you did everything that I beg younger planners that are looking to start their own firm to do, and so many of them won't. One was find a side hustle. Find a way to generate some income, not only because it does provide some side money that's coming in, but also, and this may sound a little silly, but when you're starting a business, it's kind of nice to have a distraction. It's something that stops you from spending literally every moment of every day focused on your business, and something that forces you to go out and like do something fun, and you're making a little money at the same time.
Yes, that is really true. And being able to do that and having time away from your business is important because, like you said, it kind of refreshes your brain. I didn't love running up and down stairs as a waiter for 4 days a week, sweating my butt off, but it gave me a distraction, like you said. And really it said, okay, well, these 4 days is the time I'm working as a waiter. Well, guess what? There's only 3 more days in the week, so I need to really be intentional about my business in those 3 days. So that also helped too, because as you know, if you give yourself 7 days to do something, it's going to take 7 days to do it. However, if you have only 3 days to get it done, you're going to do it in 3 days.
It's absolutely true. It's actually called Parkinson's Law. There's actually like an official law about it that says tasks take as much time as you allot them. So
yes.
It's really interesting that you bring that up. So side hustle was one thing that you really did well. And the other piece is managing the personal expense side. So often I'm talking to folks that say, yeah, I've got a spouse or I've got kids and I've got a mortgage and I'm not willing to downsize, or even if they're renting, it's, hey, can you downsize to a studio apartment or a 1-bedroom apartment for the next year or two while you get your business ramped up? And it's like, you know what? No, I'm not able to do that. And that's going to possibly make or break your business, because all of a sudden you need a ton of money coming in every month just to keep your lights on at home, much less actually reinvesting in the business to build it. So, and those are sacrifices. I personally had looked at, I didn't end up going back to being a server, but I had looked at it. And I remember thinking like, am I like comfortable with that? Like, it was almost like, am I like degrading myself by going back and doing what I did in college? But you know what? It doesn't freaking matter, because you built a business now using what you did there that led you to kind of building a business that's going to support your great life. And it was obviously a worthwhile sacrifice.
Yes, that was actually a difficult from an emotional standpoint, it was difficult to become a waiter, because I had graduated from Babson College, which is an all business, very entrepreneurial school just outside of Boston. And then I had worked for pretty big companies, and I was wearing a suit as a financial planner, and then I was going to stoop down to the waiter level after all of these years of working as a financial services representative. That's crazy. And for a lot of people it is, and it really is their ego that gets in the way, that it doesn't allow them the ability to do something that truly is going to help them in the long run. So I just kept saying to myself, this isn't about the fact that you're a waiter. It's about your vision for the future, and it's about creating some sort of structure that will allow me to get to that goal of launching my own business and about growing my business. So it didn't matter who saw me or what I had to do to get there, because I saw, it was so vivid in my mind what I wanted to get to.
I love it. So you have one of my favorite brands, honestly. Like, I love your company name, Beyond Your Hammock. I love the logo, the look and feel just of what you built there. So tell us a little bit about, like, how did you come up with that, and what was your vision for what that brand would ultimately mean for the business that you were building?
Well, that's an interesting question, because I certainly had an idea about what I wanted for my brand. And really, it was as basic as, I don't want a business name with the word finance or asset management or something very typical of our industry. to be in the name. I don't want people to read my brand and say, I know what he does, because what they think, the typical person, what they think a financial advisory firm does is not actually what I do. So why would I provide them, or why would I name my company a name that would already put that thought in their head?
Yeah, that's a really good point.
So I chose to name it something that made people question whether it was actually an advisory firm. It's like if you looked at a list of financial advisor firm names, and you saw my name on that list, you would say, did someone screw this up? Is this a hammock company? Like, what is going on with this name? Because that's exactly what I wanted, though, because then they were questioning it. I was in their head, and then I could actually have a conversation with them. And I compare it to if you're shopping for a car and you're looking for a four-door sedan, and you're looking down the line of cars and everything looks the same except for the color, and then you see this Mini Cooper sitting there. Whether you like the Mini Cooper or not, it stands out, and you say, wow, that's something different. What the heck is that? I need to know more about this just because it looks interesting. And that's exactly what I was going for with my business name. And I think I hit the nail on the head with it.
I would definitely say so. Do you get comments from clients about the name ever?
You know what? Clients don't often talk about it. I mean, certainly in the pre-client conversations, they may bring it up, like what's up with the name. I do have a story on my website about the name, I believe. Actually, I don't even know if it's on there. I've been interviewed before, and I've talked about the name and how I came up with it, which is a cool story in itself. But I think I get more comments about it when I'm out at a networking event. I use the name to my advantage because I have these networking events in Boston called A Night in the Hammock. So my business name is Beyond Your Hammock, and I have these events in Boston called A Night in the Hammock. So really, it's just bringing people together to network. I'm not making any pitches. I'm not selling my services or anything like that. I'm just hosting an event. And undoubtedly, people are saying, well, what's up with this A Night in the Hammock, and why do you actually have a hammock in the bar right now?
So you actually have a hammock in a bar in Boston for a networking event? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
That's
for a while,
awesome.
I was borrowing a hammock, and it was this huge stand and big pipes I was bringing through the bar area. So people thought I was crazy walking through. Luckily, I didn't take anybody out because those are pretty heavy.
Right. There's a great way to make a statement with your company.
Yeah. The owner of an RIA kills someone with the hammock stand. I think that's good public news for me to have.
How effective have you found those networking events to be? Like, how often are you doing them? What's kind of the structure there?
I do them about every 6 weeks. I actually co-host them with a friend of mine who's really great with event planning. She has her own company, and she does a lot of marketing work with small businesses. So she creates events for businesses, and basically she creates the event and the details and sets the event up. And we have it every 6 weeks, and I am the sponsor of the event. So we're co-hosting this thing. And like I was getting into, people say, well, what's up with the hammock? What does that mean? And then that opens the door for me to talk about my business, because I say, okay, well, the name comes from my business name, which is Beyond Your Hammock. Oh, Beyond Your Hammock, what do you do? And that gives me, again, permission to start talking more about my business and why I'm different. Oh, well, I actually help professionals in their 20s and their 30s use money as a tool to live a life they love. And a lot of times their mouth just drops and they're like, wow, that sounds interesting. Tell me more about that. So it just gives me the permission to talk about my business. And when I talk about my business, it sounds a whole heck of a lot different than what they've ever heard before in the financial planning world. So again, that provides me with access to the blue ocean, right? So if you're familiar with the book Blue Ocean Strategy, they talk about the red ocean and the blue ocean. And the red ocean is typically the place where all businesses launch. And it's just a bloodbath. That's why it's a red ocean, because there's so much competition there. So let's open another financial planning firm focused on helping baby boomers retire. Good luck with that. Everybody does that.
Everybody does.
Let's find the blue ocean. What's out there that I'm good at, that I'm passionate about, that no one else is doing? Oh, that's helping millennials grow their wealth from the ground up. Done. That's what I do.
Because there's no competition in that space, right? I mean, you probably have clients come to you that can't find any other advisor that wants to work with them other than maybe like an insurance salesman. There's not very many fee-only advisors that are really targeting your target client at this point.
Exactly. So that gives me the ability to stand out from the crowd.
You bring up a really good point in terms of naming your company and branding and all of that, just kind of in general, is that, it is easy to call your company asset management, or you could have done Roberge financial planning or Roberge asset management or something like that, and then no one could find you because they're never going to spell Roberge correctly. Roberge, no. So you're never going to get that right, but it really does allow you to differentiate because you're getting lumped in with all of these other companies that don't do anything similar to what you do. What you do doesn't look anything like the typical financial planning firm, and yet we all get lumped in together. And so you can use your company name and the brand and the way you talk about it as a way to really differentiate, because ultimately, like I said, when you say that line, which I think is brilliant, about using money as a tool, people have never heard that before. They've heard you need life insurance to protect your kids in case you die. They've never really heard like, oh, I can live my great life and I can use money to support that. It's not just about it's not all about the dollars and cents.
Yes, exactly.
So you said you target working with clients in their 20s and 30s, and we talked a little bit about fee structure earlier. So walk us through kind of the process of, clients are finding you, you're meeting at the networking event, finding them online, referrals, that sort of thing. What is your fee structure for a typical client coming on board at this point?
Sure. Well, in the industry, it's very common to have a simple assets under management fee. So in the fee-only world, we charge 1% to manage your money. Well, that automatically eliminates the people who have little to no assets, which is most likely younger people. So I needed to have something different than the typical AUM model. And in order to do that and to work with the people that I wanted to work with, which were younger people, I had to establish more of a coaching fee structure. Like you pay a personal trainer. I do consider myself a personal trainer for your finances, so why not get paid like one? So people are paying me on a monthly basis. Basically, it's an annual fee broken down by month so that it allows for people to afford my services because they're used to paying things on a monthly basis. And instead of paying a big check to me once a year, it's broken down, it's automatic, and they have access to me and my services. It doesn't mean that we meet monthly just because they pay me monthly, right? It's an annual fee broken down to a monthly payment. So we set up a structure so that we meet quarterly and we talk about everything from cash flow and establishing 12-month, 5-year and beyond goals, right? Like any type of goal that you have, whether it's buying a house, getting married, starting a business, all these things cost money. So we need to understand how much money they cost and figure out a strategy to save for those things so you can afford to do the things that you really want to do. And that's what my process does for people. So it's very much a coaching environment. I hold people accountable to getting the things done that they want to get done, right? If you say, I want to start a business in 5 years, and you keep that thought in your head, well, you may or may not do that. You may let yourself off the hook saying, you know what, that was a crazy idea, it's too hard. However, if you're paying somebody money to help you get there and you tell them this is what I want, well, you better be ready for someone to hold you accountable and say, you said next year by this time you were going to have X amount of dollars in the bank for this goal. Where are you with that? Why are you not there? Or you're doing so well, what can we do next? So that's what I do as well.
You have a really interesting process just in general. So what does a new client relationship look like for you? Because I think it's very different from what most financial planners are used to doing. So just talk through real quick the kind of the onboarding and what those initial meetings and kind of subsequent meetings for the first year look like for you.
Sure. Well, because I am a virtual, pretty much, I would say 95% virtual planner, right? I do have a handful of local clients that I meet with face-to-face because we're in the same circles. But because I'm a virtual planner, everything is different than the typical advisor. So what I do initially is send out a welcome email. Once someone says, yes, I want to work with you on an ongoing basis, I send out a welcome email. And in that email, it tells them that they're going to sign a financial planning agreement and also pay the engagement fee. I don't have a time commitment for my clients to work with me, so they really can leave at any point if they don't find value. However, I want them to be serious about what they're doing, and I want them to have some sort of skin in the game, so I've created an engagement fee that captures that. Because if you put up anywhere from $750 to $1,000 up front for a service, you're going to probably do that service, right? No one's just wasting money and saying, you know what, I'm really not interested in that. I just spent $1,000, see you later. They're ready to go. So that is the commitment that I need from my clients when they pay that engagement fee. So once they sign the financial planning agreement and pay the engagement fee, they're serious, they're committed, they're ready to go. I send them another email, and it gives them access to a spreadsheet online for them to fill out their cash flow, their income and their expenses, and also their balance sheet, their assets and their liabilities. So before we even have our first true meeting, I already know what their financial foundation looks like. And that's a term I use for cash flow and balance sheet, because it's just their financial situation today. And once we establish that, then we can talk about what goals they have. And then it's as simple as connecting the dots and creating a strategy to help them get from point A to point B.
Most advisors only care about the balance sheet. Not a lot of advisors out there do cash flow work. I think that we've all, kind of gotten used to working with older clients that have a lot of assets that have already trained themselves to be good managers of their cash flow. Otherwise, they wouldn't be wealthy enough to work with a traditional fee-only planner. So we kind of, as advisors, we tend to come in on the back end of that, whereas you're starting on the front end and actually helping them establish good spending habits, good saving habits, and basically teaching them what it's going to take to become one of those $1 million clients one day.
Yes. Yeah. And using cash flow as a tool really helps them understand what they need to do to get to the next level. I think a lot of advisors focus on retirement. And as you know, when you talk about retirement, especially first off, with a client that's 35 years old, their eyes may glaze over, they might pass out, or they might run. Like something's going to happen there, and it's not going to be a good thing. So
never good.
How can we connect the process with what they're interested in right now and what they're dealing with every day? And that's cash flow. People need to understand how to pay off debt, how to save for certain things, where their money should be going. Do they invest in their 401k? Do they save for a business? Do they help fund their child's education? Like, what is it? What are these priorities, and how do we rank them in a way that makes the most sense for their particular situation so that they can live the life that they want to live?
So how has your fee structure changed, if at all, other than just kind of the numbers from when you launched to today? So maybe talk us through, what was the fee structure when you first launched the business, and what is your fee structure today for new clients?
Sure. Well, when I first launched the business, I was scared to death to charge people a fee on a monthly basis. I didn't know how to do it, how to talk about it, and I certainly didn't see the value that I was providing for people, so how could they see the value that I was providing for them? That was a learning curve for me. And because of that, I was started out by charging, I think I charged my first client $50 a month.
With no upfront fee?
With maybe $500 upfront fee, or $250 or something. I think it was $250. It was $250 engagement fee and $50 a month. Completely undervaluing what I was doing.
Completely.
However, I was not confident in my process at that point, so I didn't want to overcharge. So I undercharged instead. And then I became more confident in my process. I started to really get a defined process, and I was comfortable doing what I was doing, and I knew that I was adding value for people. So that fee increased, because really the fee that I truly think clients need to pay for the value that I offer is right now about $9.99 upfront and $149 a month. That seems to be a comfortable level for me and for my clients. However, it wasn't until this year that I started charging that. So I launched my business in 2013. It wasn't until this year, 2015, that I just recently started getting to those numbers. And it was just a gradual increase as I felt more confident, as my process became more solid, as I saw my clients truly benefiting from the services I was offering them. I brought my fee up.
And I think that's pretty common to, kind of come into the space feeling a little unsure. You don't have a planning process, right? I mean, I remember my first client, when they signed on, I went, oh crap, like I actually don't even know how many meetings I'm going to have with this client. I don't even have a planning process in place yet. So charging them a little less than, what your clients are after you've had, after you have 20, 30, 40 clients and you've worked with, a bunch of folks and you've kind of defined that process. The other thing too is I think you can raise your fees, as you said, as you become more comfortable selling it. Because ultimately, if you're not confident in what you're doing and confident in the dollars that you're throwing out there, no one will buy it. So you've got to really own the fact that, what you do for $1,000 upfront and $150 a month is so much more valuable than what they're paying. And you know that. And so you can really articulate that to the client.
Yes.
So They're getting financial planning for this fee. Do you do investment management at all?
I do, yes. And that's a really a whole other conversation in itself. It's a challenge. I think this is one of the biggest challenges that people have when they're moving into this model where there's a monthly subscription. How do you bring in the investment management? Because clearly, if you're talking about someone's personal financial life, the investment conversation is going to come up. They typically will have an old 401k or an IRA that they're like, I don't know what to do with this. What do we do? So you see a lot of people struggling with how to fit that into the business. Is that just ancillary to the financial planning process, so it kind of fits underneath the monthly subscription, or are you charging separately for that? And really what I contemplated this for a long time, and I found that it makes the most sense for me to have completely separate fees for that, because really it's a different process, it's a different value that I add. So talking about managing your cash flow and setting goals and even opening a Roth IRA is one thing. But then making the investments, rebalancing, and adjusting the risk tolerance of an investment account is another dynamic. And I think we should be paid for that. Now, do I think we should be paid to the max? Like I would never charge someone 1.5% to manage their investments and charge a financial planning fee, because that just gouges people. However, if I can charge a decent financial planning fee per month and then just add maybe say something in the realm of 0.7% for investments, well, now we're talking about a more doable setup.
So are you using any technology or a TAMP or any platform behind you, or are you custodying and handling all of the assets yourself?
I'm doing a little of both right now. I do find that my time is best spent with clients on the financial planning process, and the more time I have to, like I said, rebalance, invest client money, and do the back office work that investment management takes, the less productive I am overall. So I have recently connected with Betterment, which is an online robo-advisor, if you will, which provides me that back office support in the investment management side. So I can use their system, help guide my clients to invest the way that's best for them, depending on their goal for their investment and their time horizon. And then Betterment rebalances automatically, and they are continually updating their investment choices and they use exchange traded funds to make sure that we have an optimal portfolio that is a low cost, very transparent setup.
And we probably will do an entire episode, if not multiple shows, on using a robo-advisor, whether it be Betterment Institutional or one of the other TAMPs, because I think it's a really interesting conversation. And you bring up some really awesome initial talking points, I think, around why would you use them and how you're, the fact that you are charging in addition to the services that they're providing and things like that. But I wanted to hear whether or not you were actually using them, and hopefully in a future episode we can talk more about the actual kind of nuts and bolts of doing that.
Yeah, I'd love to.
So as we're kind of wrapping up, we're coming to the end of our time. One question that I love to ask our guests, and this is something that I don't know that we really think about often enough. So I didn't prep you for this question, so we'll see what comes out of it. If you could go back and give yourself one piece of advice, and this is probably the Eric Roberge that was, just kind of making the transition from managing tax paperwork to actually being in the financial services world and getting your Series 7. If you could go back and give that Eric, one piece of advice, what do you wish you could have gone back and told yourself?
I think it's a very, very deep question, Alan. No, I think that it's something around the phrase, be comfortable being uncomfortable. Because along this path, I was uncomfortable a lot. And I always thought that, well, I'm feeling this way, so I must not be doing something right. And there really is no right answer when it comes to creating this life that I love and developing a business that is profitable and effective in what the service it delivers. So I think it's just kind of take one step at a time and be comfortable being uncomfortable. You'll see it will develop. Something will develop. Whether it's the initial vision that you had or it's something completely new, it doesn't really matter, because you're going to be able to choose how things go along the way.
I love it. That's such good advice because you were right. When you're uncomfortable, we're wired to not live in pain. So we want to change something, but sometimes it's okay to be in that uncomfortable space.
Yeah.
Well, Eric, this has been such a pleasure. Thanks so much, man, for coming on the show and sharing your backstory and your wisdom in going through this process from, really kind of just barely getting into financial services all the way through starting your own firm at a pretty young age. So thanks again for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. I love this topic. I could talk for days on it. So whenever you want me to come back on and talk about something different, please shoot me a note.
Sounds good. We'll have to do that. I hope you enjoyed today's interview with Eric. There are so many valuable lessons to be learned from his career path. One of the things that Eric said that really sticks with me is that he thought it was going to be really hard to start a financial planning firm, but he was actually fortunate enough to be in a position where he got to see what it took to run an RIA from the inside whenever he partnered with that investment advisor and realized it really wasn't as challenging as he thought it was going to be. So I hope his story can give you the inspiration to chase your dreams, no matter what that means for you, whether it is starting your own firm or it's partnering with another firm or becoming the succession plan, whatever it means for you. I hope that his story can give you that inspiration. As always, you can check out all of the resources that we mentioned during the show at xyplanningnetwork.com/6. You can get the show notes as well as the resources that we mentioned during the episode. Before we go, I do want to give a quick shout out to our launch week sponsor, Low Load Insurance Services. I've personally worked with Low Load for over 4 years now and have to say that they are an incredibly valuable member to your financial planning team. As fee-only advisors, we simply can't transact insurance on behalf of our clients, and telling clients to go shop for coverage with a local insurance agent certainly isn't ideal. I have found that working with LLIS, it really allows me to provide a much higher level of service in regards to insurance than I can provide on my own because I simply don't have the high level of expertise that they have because they have a growing team of over 16 insurance specialists that know the ins and outs of the insurance industry. If you'd like to learn more, you can go to llis.com. You can also check out a link to their website in our show notes at xyplanningnetwork.com/6, and also tune in to episode 5 for an in-depth interview with Mark Maurer, the CEO of LLIS. Thanks again so much for taking the time to hang out, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time.
You're not alone, and you're not crazy. It's scary starting, building, and growing your own financial planning firm. And that's why we put together a free private community just for you, the Cutting Edge Financial Planner. Go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP or text XYPN Radio to 33344 and join a network of thousands ready to change the lives of Gen X and Gen Y clients.